Welcome to the Go Out Living Attitude, a cancer survivor's journey through health and wellness, helping others search for the tools to bring us a healthier and happier lifestyle. Hi everyone, Jonathan Brandt, Go Out Living. Today's special guest is Dr. Katherine Lanning, occupational therapist, as well as founder of Transformed for Life Ministry. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I thought we could start with your story and how you kind of got into everything and kind of more towards a holistic part, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I first discovered occupational therapy when I was in my second year of college. So I had gone to school at Virginia Tech, and at first I was interested in pursuing a profession actually in dietetics. So I also really had this strong love for food. I love to cook, I love to bake, I love to be in the kitchen. And growing up, whenever I had heard about health and wellness or thought about health and wellness, one of the first things that came to mind for me was exercise and food. And I really didn't know that there was a whole lot of other things that I know now go into this idea of health and wellness. I think for most people, it's just what you eat and how you move your body, and there's not much else to it. And so at the time, I was really drawn to dietetics, and actually when I started my freshman year was taking all of the courses related to that, and the chemistry was so hard. The chemistry just really humbled me really fast, and I knew that if I was going to keep progressing in this major, it was going to require more chemistry and organic chemistry. And I was like, this is way more scientifically involved and heavy in the biology and all of those things that I really was not strong in academically. And so I ended up switching my major after my first year of college to human development, and I minored in psychology. And actually, at this time in my life, too, I had suffered a pretty significant car accident and I had to get hip surgery done. And so while I was going through the process of recovering from my hip surgery, I was receiving outpatient physical therapy, and I had discovered other occupational therapists who were working in the same clinic. And at this time, I had never heard of occupational therapy. It's not a really well known or well understood profession, but I saw a little bit about what these professionals were doing with other people who would come in. And as I started looking into the profession for myself, I understood that occupational therapy is a very holistic and encompassing health profession that really doesn't look just at physical ailments, but also considers the whole person, as well as the relationship that we have in our health between the person and what we do and the environment in which this takes place. And so in looking into that more, my understanding of health was expanded into more than just diet and exercise and more than just physical well-being. And I really appreciated that whole person approach. So I ended up pursuing that and going straight to grad school after finishing up college, and recently moved to Charlotte, North Carolina after finishing that, and have just been pursuing my career in occupational therapy since.
That's awesome. Here's what I know of occupational therapy. My wife was getting it when she was going through her treatments. She had a lot of side effects from the chemo. One of her big things was neuropathy. But what I loved about it was they came to your house. It's like you said, they look at everything. And not a lot of people understand that it's like you said, there's a holistic side of it.
Yeah, there really is. And even getting experience in different settings, going through school and doing my field works, what occupational therapists do varies so much between setting to setting that it is such a widely encompassing profession. Because if you think about it, we are trained to work with individuals across the lifespan. So that includes babies in the NICU all the way up to hospice and end of life care. And so we have to be well versed in understanding the different stages of development, as well as understanding really how all kinds of different injuries, illnesses, and diseases, the effects that they have on a person, not just physically, but how that's going to impact an individual's ability to engage in all of the things that we do throughout our day. So engaging in sleep, engaging in work, engaging in self-care, engaging in household chores and responsibilities, even showing up in relationships and social participation. So it's such a broad profession that really does look different depending on the population that you're working with, as well as the setting that you're in.
Yeah, because people don't understand how much is involved in everyday activity in general.
Right.
And if you can't do the basics, it's tough, and you don't realize it until it happens, right?
Yes, it's so much of our life can be taken for granted, especially when it comes to health and well being. And even for me now, currently, I actually sprained my ankle so badly on Friday, and I'm in a boot now and might have to go through some of my own rehab process. So it's like, wow, I just forgot even just the value of having the ability to get up and walk without pain or get dressed without having to think, about pulling my sock on and it hurts or, showering, all of the things that we can just take for granted or not have to think about until you experience some kind of health impact where it really does change your ability to gauge in those things well.
How do you handle those stubborn individuals that don't think they need it? And I say that because, there's several times my wife was like, "Nope, not doing it," and yeah, it's just so important now.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, for me, I have worked in a couple different settings as an occupational therapist. When I first came out of grad school, I started working PRN shifts at Atrium Inpatient Rehab. And so that was a hospital setting where patients would be in the hospital for a few days, up to a few weeks at a time. And most of the things that are focused in occupational therapy would be pretty heavy on those activities of daily life, self care related things. So we would be the professionals going in, evaluating how well and how independently a person could go about things like getting dressed, getting a shower, getting their shoes and socks on, brushing their teeth, making sure that they were able to do all of those things efficiently and safely in order to prepare for their discharge home. And I would encounter a lot of patients who would just be so eager to get back home, and completely understandable. A lot of them were being transferred over from acute care settings, so they may have been in a hospital setting before they came to inpatient care. And a lot of times they were independent, and it was more of a safety measure of just making sure, you're not letting your blood pressure get into a dangerous range, making sure that you're not doing anything impulsively or unsafe that could result in a fall, very practical things like that. But then I would also encounter patients, and there would sometimes just be the difficulty that comes with the perception that they were losing autonomy or not wanting to accept help, or have to think about using assistive tools and aids that might maybe make them feel a little bit stigmatized. A lot of people who didn't want to, for instance, be in a wheelchair or want to use tools like reachers or stock aids or shoehorns because it made them feel, inadequate or insufficient, or just used to being able to do those things so easily and not have to think about it, that it was kind of a position where it felt like they were losing some of their control and autonomy. So really trying to be compassionate in that approach. I'm coming from a place where I'm trying to help you, and I understand that you've experienced maybe a very profound medical challenge or an injury or something to where your life going forward from this point is going to look different. I mean, I worked with a lot of people who experienced traumatic brain injuries or strokes or the loss of a limb and amputation or something very difficult, to where this is going to require a completely new way of showing up in your daily life. And that's hard because they're grieving, the loss of the autonomy and the loss of the control. And so it's more than just having to go about your activities of daily living differently. It's accepting and grieving and being able to move through that process. And even now, in the setting that I work primarily in, which is in a school setting, even supporting children who have different learning disabilities or autism or ADHD. And for some of them, having to also collaborate with their parents and their teachers, of knowing, hey, this child is going to need a different level of support. Things are going to have to look a little bit differently. And that is hard to accept when you just want to have your life look like everybody else's or what it used to look like. But this is a process of just keeping you as purposefully engaged in life as possible.
I love that. I got one more that's kind of probably gonna be hard.
Yeah.
So when I was getting my bone marrow transplant, it basically came down to they weren't gonna let me out of bed.
Mm,
As you know, you lose your strength very quickly.
yes.
Do you see any difference? And a lot of times, the nurses, the CNAs, they just didn't have time to take you for a walk, or they didn't. How can they change that? Do you think there is a call for them to change that, or they need to continue that strength through whatever you're going through? Because I think that was my biggest problem is from my standpoint, from Christie's, it was like you got so weak by being in the hospital every time you came out. It seemed like so much worse. And I
Yeah,
understand you're gonna come out you're not gonna be 100% for sure, I get that, but sometimes I just didn't think there was enough that was going on while you were in there.
absolutely. I mean, I think that is why there is such a push to have physical therapists and occupational therapists on a patient's plan of care because the reality is that our healthcare system is so overworked, and we do have a medical model that we exist in that is driven by all kinds of different factors and all kinds of different incentives. And nurses are commonly stretched very thin, especially for nurse aides, and their primary role related to nursing is going to be the medication management and making sure that the doctor's recommendations as it relates to medication and wound care and procedures are being carried through effectively. And then for nurses' aides, they are assisting the nurse in that task, and then also will sometimes have the responsibility to help with activities of self care as well, which is the overlap with occupational therapy. And I was a certified nursing aide when I was in college as well. So I'm very familiar with that role. So I was giving bed baths and showers and helping people get dressed and down for breakfast and lunch well before I became an occupational therapist. But essentially, I think that you're absolutely right. When patients are not being in positions where they're able to do even bed level exercises, or at least come sit on the edge of the bed or walk themselves to the bathroom if they're able to, and then come back. It can definitely have devastating implications as far as losing strength and losing muscle mass and losing the ability to get back to a different state of functioning. And unfortunately, what is sometimes being happened by different professionals is because they don't have the time, or they don't have the staffing, or they don't have the extra support that would be needed from a professional opinion such as a therapist as to how to safely go about this task. The easiest, most efficient way is just to do that task for the patient. So it's much easier to just give a bed level sponge bath versus go through the effort of actually getting this patient in a waterproof wheelchair or in a shower chair and wheeling them in and having them do as much as possible and then bringing them back. I mean, that was a lot of my treatment sessions in inpatient therapy, and it is exhausting, but it's so worth it because that is how you preserve a patient's ability, not just their physical abilities and strength that do significantly deteriorate the longer they stay in bed and the less you use those things, but also, again, like their autonomy and their empowerment to be able to do those things by themselves and to have those little wins of, today was still a hard day, but at least I was able to sit at the sink and brush my teeth there instead of having to do everything in bed. And then even I think there's opportunities as well between therapists and nursing staff, maybe more so with the certified nursing aides, but giving them a handout for, hey, these are bed level exercises that the patient is clear to do that's not going to disrupt any of their medical contraindications that they might have going on. Here's a handout. And it would be really great if you have time with this person, maybe after you set them up for lunch, to just go through these exercises with them. Or giving that handout to the caregiver, making sure that there's someone to have carryover in the strategies that your recommendations are in line with. So because for the therapist too, I mean, we usually have a set schedule and you might only have a guaranteed 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or 90 minutes with this patient. And so you have to make sure that the other people who are going to see this person more could have the opportunity to carry over some of those things that you're teaching.
No, I agree 100%. A lot of my it was just mental for me.
Mhm.
I was trying to use physicality to get me through everything, I always do. So when I was told, "Yeah, you can't get out of bed without help," it was devastating to me, and when I came out, man, between me and my wife, we we probably look like the 90-year-olds trying to help each other with the walker, it was just
Ah,
horrible,
yeah.
and a lot of it for me was it was a protocol. If you're running a fever, you had to meet certain aspects to get up and go do your own thing. Well, I was feeling it. A lot of had to do with orthostatic blood pressures. Well, I was freaking myself out. So, it was sky high every time, and yeah, then they're like, "Well, you can't go." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." It was just the mental side of it absolutely just destroyed me, and I get it's gonna be hard, but so I wanna move on to the spiritual part of this, because I think that's as important as everything, and I think a lot of people, I mean, for myself as well, I'm trying to find something. After my wife's passing, after going through everything I'm going through, I think that's a huge part of what a lot of people are missing or wanting and just don't know how to do it as well. But if you could maybe explain your side of it and where the ministry comes in.
Yeah, so for me personally, I was feeling so much frustration working in the inpatient setting, and it had nothing to do with the particular institution that I was at. It's just the patterns and themes that I was noticing in healthcare as a whole. And it was really challenging and difficult for me to work with patients and to see their state of health and to see the circumstances of their lives and to feel like I was only able to offer temporary solutions to their problems that really weren't getting to the root of things. And so I eventually made the decision to walk away from the inpatient setting. And that's at first what kind of led me into my private practice setting now, because I really enjoy the idea of being able to work with clients from more of a holistic perspective, really have more time to sit down with them and really go through each area of occupation and their functioning in that area of occupation and how we could work together to make that a little bit more efficient and productive for them, whatever that looked like. And at the time, I think part of it came right from the frustrations that I was experiencing within our medical system. And then part of it also came from an internal personal struggle that I was having, because I had also gone through instances in my own life where I knew that my own health was not in the place that I wanted it to be. And so I was trying to apply everything that I had learned about mental and physical and spiritual well-being to myself, kind of as my own guinea pig as I was going through my own health struggles. And so ultimately, through a series of life circumstances and events, I came to know the love of the Lord, of Jesus, in 2023. And so after that, I had really gone on a personal journey of establishing a true relationship with Him. And it led me to really reading His Word, reading the Bible completely through for the first time on my own. And even though I had grown up in a Christian household and grown up going to church and being familiar with the key themes of Christianity, none of it ever really resonated in my heart. And so it wasn't until I really made that personal decision to seek Him and to read the Bible, I was starting to learn so much about, honestly, His blueprint for health and His blueprint for life. And I was really grappling with so many questions related to, well, what's the point of living this healthy life and doing all these things for health when people are still going to die, when that's not an avoidable thing? Nobody gets out of death with or out of life without escaping death, and nobody is able to overcome that. And what's the point? You can live a perfectly healthy life and still end up with a chronic condition. You can still end up with cancer, still end up with heart disease, or still get into a freak accident. And then now half your brain doesn't work and your life looks totally different. So everything felt so unpredictable. And that's kind of what I had learned in my own life, because even when I had put so much effort into healing myself, quote unquote, and doing all of the right things, I still was so broken on the inside that I knew that I needed a solution outside of myself. And so that's ultimately what led me down the journey to want to start also dabbling in ministry efforts as well, because this is where I'm really able to walk individuals through. This is the whole picture to health and healing. This is, the concepts of health and healing tied with the truth of the gospel and the truth of scripture, and how we can really practically take all of that and apply it to our lives today. And ultimately, the point of it, because like I said, I mean, we're still subject to forces outside of ourselves. We can't be in control of everything. And so the only explanation that really made sense to me. And knowing that was knowing that there's going to be a life beyond this, and there's going to be something that carries over into eternity when this life does come into an end.
Well, and I think you put it perfectly as well, that we wait until something happens. And that's with everything. I mean, that's from health, nutrition. We
Yes.
just wait. And the spiritual side is part of that. And then when something happens, it's like, oh, where I'm at. I admit it. I wasn't there before Christy or before my diagnosis. And you sit there and you wish you were, but it just, we wait. How do we, how do you reach people? How do you let them know that this is there? And there's no stigmatism behind it, because I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I think that the best way to reach people is through mutual understanding. And I think that there are so many people that are so turned away from Christianity and the church and biblical beliefs because they've been hurt by people who profess this name and this title and who are not understanding and compassionate towards their current circumstances. So I try to be as open as I possibly can in saying that I'm not a perfect person and I'm not the perfect picture of health. And yes, I've been given this information and this knowledge and this experience, and I want to use it in a helpful way, but I am not going to ever try to pretend that I am better than somebody in any capacity, or that I could understand completely what someone else is going through when they're experiencing a really hard time or a lot of questions, about life and death and about why they have a certain diagnosis or why things went a certain way they did. I mean, those are really very raw and very real human emotions. And I think that those deserve to be met with loving kindness and compassion. And I think that when you do that and when you share your experiences in truth and vulnerability too, that opens a door and it creates a bridge to where there can be a mutual understanding. And it's not me trying to prove to be right or to make a certain point come across or be known in some way. It's just relating to people on a human level and hearing the emotions that are being expressed when someone is telling you their story, and just holding the space and the opportunity for that without immediately trying to correct it or come in and fix it and provide the solution. Just saying, I hear that and I can honor that. And I've experienced something similar. This is what it looked like in my life. And this is what it meant to me. And allowing that person to take what resonates with them and respecting that it's going to be a personal journey and a personal experience for everybody. And it has to be. So, what that I went down might be different than yours, but they're all, available to us.
How do you combine the two? How do you combine the ministry with the health and wellness?
So I really try to keep the foundation of the ministry as the gospel. And so essentially everything that's in the ministry, the only difference between what I do from a ministry perspective and what I do in my private practice is the steps that I will guide participants through. So with the ministry, the center and the foundation of everything is coming from a biblical perspective and from a biblical truth. And so the first step in it is, do you have a relationship with God? And if not, what are some of the barriers that are getting in that? Is it a perception of what you think God to be? Is there unprocessed hurt and anger or confusion or questions towards Him? Like, where are you kind of starting in your ability to come to the Lord? And then the second step is that then you have to do a self inventory and really figure out where these different hangups are occurring in your life. And I incorporate all of the things that I've learned as an occupational therapist into this ministry. So when I walk participants through a self inventory, we're looking at all of those different areas of occupation, analyzing your self care, analyzing your work, analyzing your instrumental activities of daily living, your education, your relationships, all of these different areas of life, your environment too, and letting people do an evaluation of that, which is similar to what I would do in my occupational therapy practice as well. But the difference, again, in the ministry is that you're doing this in light of having a relationship with the Lord, allowing the Holy Spirit to be the one to kind of reveal truth to you in that way. And then the next step is to redefine your identity. So now instead of looking to what beliefs you've internalized about yourself or what the world has told you to internalize, now turning to scripture and seeking the Lord's truth or what the Lord would say about a particular area of your life and how, according to his will and commandments, we are to kind of mirror that in our own lives. And so the steps really continue to build from there. And it's the same steps modeled from theories of change and motivation that are prevalent in psychology and in occupational therapy and in mental health. You know, you have to have awareness in terms of where you're starting. And then you have to have a new truth that's going to come in and replace your old narratives and your old ways of thinking and being, because everything that we do starts with identity. So if that hasn't been established first, yeah, you can change your behavior and you can change a bunch of things on the external, but it's not likely to stick. It's not likely to last because it's just going to be behavior modification at the end of the day. So in either sense, you really have to start with meeting the person where they're at from an identity standpoint, figuring out where the dysfunction is coming from in their life, because it might be a physical thing, it might be a mental thing, it might be a spiritual thing, it might be a combination of all three of those facets, because we're made up of all of those different domains. And so once that truth is made clear, then kind of coming in, replacing that truth, then allowing your actions to change as a result of that. And that can include things that I do with my clients all the time in my occupational therapy practice, as far as building routines, building systems, being consistent in your new ways of doing things, and then allowing that to then eventually become your default lifestyle, which is a process that takes time. So there is a lot of overlap between the two. The biggest difference is just that the ministry really incorporates the whole truth of the gospel, whereas in my private practice, that's something that's available to people if they're interested in it. But I do try to be respectful of professional boundaries, and sometimes people are just interested more in getting occupational therapy services, and I, allow them to have that experience, and keep the ministry just really as, hey, this is everything that I have been revealed to in my life, and I don't ever want to feel like I've held back or like I didn't give people everything that I possibly could.
Well, and like we say, it's the tools. It's knowing, it's learning all of it and giving them the option of anything because it's there. Dr. Katherine Lanning, occupational therapist, founder of Transformed for Life Ministry. We'll put all your information on the blog post. Is there anything else you want people to know before we go out?
I would just like people to know that it's okay to do things differently, and it's okay that health is going to look differently for you in different phases and seasons and circumstances of life. And something that I used to tell patients that I still tell clients today in my private practice is, on the days that you feel like you only had 20% left and you gave that 20%, you still gave 100%. So I think it's just really important for us to be gentle, compassionate with ourselves, to be surrounded by people who can meet us where we're at, and just to have grace and know that wherever you are in this health journey, and even if it looks different compared to another person or compared to what it used to be for you yourself, there's still something valuable in this. You're still here for a reason and for a purpose, and that is not going to be wasted.
I love that. No, I appreciate that so much. Also, I don't think I mentioned it, but you also have a podcast with the same name, Transformed for Life.
Yes, I do.
So everybody needs to go out and watch that and listen to that. Yeah, take in as much as you can from Dr. Lanning. I mean, I think it's so important from every side. You can learn, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate this. And like I said, we'll post everything on the website. And yeah, what a great discussion. I really appreciate
Great.
it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right, everybody, as you know, find the attitude, keep the attitude, go out living. Bye.